You did the work, a full year in Nova Scotia, reference letter, pay stubs, T4, and an officer can still decide none of it counts. Not because you lied, but because of how this province defines one word experience. Get that wrong and you don't just lose your application, you lose years of your life. Hi, I'm Bella Lee, a regulated Canadian immigration consultant with Lanjo Immigration here in Nova Scotia. I help applicants review their files before they submit because once it's in, you don't get a second chance to fix it. On February 18th of this year, Nova Scotia took 10 old immigration streams and folded them into 4. If you are qualifying on the work experience you already have in the province, not a brand new job offer, the pathway you're looking at is now called Nova Scotia Express Entry. The rules didn't get softer in that change, right? They got consolidated and they are enforced just as strictly as before. The reason why I'm making this video is that I don't want you to spend a year earning experience, paying for language test, building an expression of interest, and then finding out that the experience never qualified in the first place. That's a year of your life, real money gone on a technicality that you could have caught at your kitchen table. So I'm going to walk you through where this stream quietly breaks. State each rule plainly, then show you where it stops being a checklist and starts being a judgment call, because the second part is the part you can't always audit on your own. Start with the math because most people get it wrong before they reach the hard stuff. 1 year of experience doesn't mean 1 year on a calendar. It means 1560 hours. Full-time, the province counts them as 30 hours a week over 12 months. And there is the cap that surprises people. 30 hours is a ceiling per week, no matter what you actually worked. Pull 50, 60 hours a week, double shifts over time, the officer still credits you 30 for that week. You can't compress a year of work into 8 months by grinding overtime. The 50-60 just can't happen in under 12 months. Part-time counts too, 15 hours a week over 24 months, and you can stack jobs. But that 30-hour ceiling still applies across all of them. Now the part that ends the application. There is a recency window. For Nova Scotia Express Entry, your 1560 hours have to fall entirely within 3 years right before you submit. 3 years, not 5. I'm flagging that on purpose because the skilled worker stream, the one that needs a job offer, uses 5 years. People read about the 5-year window on a forum, assume it applies to them, and it doesn't. If your Nova Scotia experience is solid, but is sitting 3 years and 1 month back, for this stream, it legally does not exist. So the first check is simple. Do my hours land inside the 3-year window? That one is a yes or no. The next ones aren't. This is one to slow down for. The province does not take your job title at face value. Your contract can say supervisor. Your business card can say manager. None of that decides your knock. What decides is what you actually did all day. The rule is across your time in the role, you have to have performed at least 51% of the main duties listed in the knock profile for the occupation you are claiming, more than half. So picture a retail supervisor, tier 2 on paper, eligible, but the reference letter read honestly shows 3/4 of the shift was running a till, stocking shelves, cleaning up. Only a quarter was actually supervision, scheduling, handling escalations, ordering inventory. An officer reads that and reclassifies the role down to tier 4, and tier 4 doesn't qualify for the stream. The whole 50-60 hours gone. Not because the work wasn't real, but because the duties didn't cross into the skill level you claimed. Here's why you can't always catch this yourself. You're inside the job. You know you supervised. What you can't see is how your duties read on paper to a stranger against a federal knock profile you've probably never opened. That gap between what that job felt like and how it documents is exactly where the stream refuses people. When I'm reviewing a file with a client, this is the first thing I'm mapping, not the title, the duties, line by line against the code. Because if you're under 51% and don't know it, everything downstream is built on sand. If you've looked at your own duties and genuinely can't tell which side of that 51% line you're on, that's not a sign you did anything wrong. It's the exact thing a second set of eyes is for. You can book an application review with me. The link is in the description. 2 traps live inside one question. Where did the work physically happen? First, remote work. I know how normal working from home has become. This stream did not get that memo. Nova Scotia Express Entry excludes what the province calls a business with a telework arrangement. Work fully remote, even for a Halifax company, even living here the whole time, paying provincial tax, and the officer can rule that experience out. The province wants a real physical work site, so a software developer who did 15-60 hours for a Halifax firm entirely from a home office, at risk. Hybrid is the gray zone, and gray zones are judgment calls. So how it's documented matters enormously. Second trap, and it feels brutally unfair, the PGWP graduation rule. If the experience was earned on a post-graduation work permit, you must have graduated from a school physically in Nova Scotia. Picture it. You finish a program in Toronto, the federal government hands you an open work permit, work anywhere in Canada, legal. You move to Halifax, take a great tier 1 job, work 2 years, flawlessly, federally, perfect. For this provincial stream, ineligible. A hard yes or no, but almost nobody knows to ask until it's too late. Some kinds of work gets thrown out no matter how skilled, local, or recent. Run down this list. Self-employment, out. Independent contractor, freelancer, sole proprietor, gig work. The stream needs a genuine employer-employee relationship. Work you did as a full-time student, out, regardless of hours or skill. Co-op terms, practicum, internships, out. Even a full-time engineering co-op. Volunteer or unpaid work, out. Commission only, out. Most of that is a clean yes or no. But here is a subtle one that's a judgment call. Self-employment dressed up as a job. Set up a company, make yourself an employee, and officers look past the title at the shareholding, the organization chart, who actually answer to whom to decide if you were really an employee or running your own show. One more thing and it shifts. The province pauses occupations and whole sectors when it's overloaded. As I'm recording this, food service supervisors are paused, and there is a broad pause on the entire accommodation and food service sector. The trap inside that, your job's not code and your employer's industry are two different things. An HR manager, a perfectly eligible role working for a hotel, gets caught by the sector pause anyway because the hotel sits in the paused industry. These lists change without much notice. Before you submit, check the current one. Here's one almost nobody talks about, and I'll be straight with you about what's settled and what isn't. In Nova Scotia, before an employer can hire or recruit a foreign worker, they are legally required to hold an employer registration certificate, an ERC, from labor standards. That part isn't a gray area. It is in labor standards code, and it's actually an offense for an employer to hire a foreign worker without one. Now, the uncertain part, and I'm not going to pretend otherwise. What happens to your experience on this stream if your employer didn't have an ERC while you worked there? The wording of the guide reads like the work was meant to be done for a properly registered employer, but there is no published line that says plainly no ERC and your hours don't count. I've looked. So this may come down to an officer's discretion. It might void that period, it might not. But that's not your paperwork, it's the employer's. You could have held a valid permit, shown up, done the work exactly right, and still be exposed because of something your employer skipped. I won't give you a verdict I don't have. What I'll tell you is this: prepare for the worst. Find out whether your employer was registered for the time you're claiming. If there is a gap, that's exactly the kind of thing you want looked at before you submit, not after an officer raises it. Now the one that turns a refusal into something far worse. Everything so far cost you an application. This can cost you 5 years. When an officer doubts the experience, they look for specific tells. A Tier 1 professional title, but pay stubs at minimal wage. Full-time work dates that overlap with full-time study. An employer's office in Halifax, but your address 4 hours away in Sydney. No sign you ever commuted. Each one triggered a closer look. And here's the one that catches careful, honest people. The reference letter that copies the knock duties word for word. People do this trying to pass the 51% test cleanly, but officers spot verbatim knock language and it reads as manufactured, built for immigration, not a real job description. That flips you from does this qualify into is this genuine? If it goes that way, you'll usually get a procedural fairness letter first, a chance to respond before any decision. And the courts have been clear, the letter has to tell you the real concern, not bury it. But that's your one window. If an officer concludes you misrepresented a material fact, inflated hours, manufactured duties, hidden that the work was remote, that's Section 40 of the Act. A 5-year ban, profile deleted, no applications, temporary or permanent for half a decade. The thing is, the line between an honest mistake and misrepresentation is thinner than people think. Innocent errors that don't hide the truth can be forgiven, but I didn't realize is a hard place to argue from once your file is in front of an officer. So let me bring this back to where we started. 3 outcomes, and they're not equal. An expression of interest or EOI that just expires, that's nothing. You resubmit, no harm. A formal refusal that stays on your record and you declare it on every application after. A misrepresentation finding, that's a 5-year ban. Almost everything in this video is about understanding where that third outcome comes from so you can steer clear of it. And it comes down to one habit. Audit your experience honestly, the way an officer will, before you ever hit submit. Some of these are yes or no checks you can do tonight, your hours, your window, your PGWP school. Others, the 51% line, the remote work gray zone, the ERC gap, whether your structure reads as employment, those are where guessing is the expensive option. If you're at that point, by all means, book an application review. The link is in the description and we'll go through your actual history together before the province does. This is the work experience piece of a short series on where Nova Scotia nominee applications quietly fail. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in my next video.